right. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm really excited to be here and just wanted to thank Leadership Tribe for hosting me today and allowing me to speak to you all in this webinar. So I'm Nina. I'm an Agile coach. A little bit by way of introduction, I work for a startup called AIR. And I started my career back in 2003 as a software engineer. So really, I've been on both sides of the Agile coin. I've used Scrum and other Agile methods as a developer, and then I've coached teams later when I moved and switched roles. Why I mention this is that I count both of these as two sides of the same coin. And having been on both sides has really helped me appreciate the value of agility and how powerfully this can help teams deliver on outcomes. So I'm also a little bit of a people watcher, and it's very important in the context of this talk because this talk is about people. And one of the things that most amazes me about all of us as people is the incredible depth of human diversity and the differences that make each and every one of us unique. And when we look at teams, we bring these differences to our teams. We bring our life experiences, and that sort of flows into the organization and makes for a very rich and dynamic experience. So my talk today is going to be about one of these super important but extremely misunderstood dimensions of human diversity, which is introversion and extroversion. So let's begin. I am going to quickly go over some of the outcomes that we have or that we hope to cover as part of this webinar. So my hope is that when you leave this talk, you have an understanding of the neuroscience behind the introvert-extrovert spectrum, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then you can interpret group dynamics, keeping in mind the introvert-extrovert spectrum. And finally, you can create a plan of action that you can carry into your facilitation and design of events and spaces for team collaboration. So let's get started. I hope everybody has some pen and paper. If you don't, please grab some paper and think about an introvert in your life. It could be anybody. It could be a friend. It could be a family member or anybody you know at work. So think about an introvert that you know in your life and write down some words that come to mind. I'll give you a minute. If you're comfortable, please share on chat. Okay, I see some responses. Chitra, would you be able to help me with what's being said?
Yes, so Rebecca has mentioned it's quite sensitive and nervous, and Shubha has mentioned it mysterious, creative, quiet.
Great, okay. Let's just give everybody 10 seconds or so more. Are there any more coming through?
Yeah, Carol has mentioned it's shy, and Jigar Shah, quiet.
Okay,
thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you. So just hold on to that piece of paper. Thanks for all your responses. We can come back and see if anything has shifted for you once this talk is over. So I'm going to move on and I'm going to tell you all a personal story. So things like this usually begin with something personal, and that was the case for me. So I'm the mom of two boys. I've got two little boys. They are 8 and 5 now, but this was a couple of years ago when my 8-year-old was 5. And we live in the UK. And there's a place where you make burgers here called Nando's. It's a place where you can go and have burgers. But what's interesting about the restaurant is that they also run activities for kids where you can take school children and they can make their own burgers. And the kids love it because there's an element of autonomy to the whole activity. So a couple of years ago, I was on a school trip with my son. I was a volunteer, I was a parent volunteer. And I found myself that morning in a bus full of 5 and 6 year olds heading to Nando's, and we were going to make burgers. So when we got there, the group leader started the session by asking everybody a few questions. So she started by the usual questions that seem like team building questions. She said, "Where are you all?" And the group chorus, "Nando's." And then she asked again, "Why are you all here?" And they said, "To make burgers." Now, all through this, I noticed that my son was very, very quiet. And until the session actually began. So once the session began, he turned into a happy participant. He was totally engaged in the activity. He was asking a lot of questions. He was participating and he was having a lot of fun. So this really puzzled me. What was it that made him quiet when the questions were being asked? And then what was it that actually made him come out of himself and have a good time when the activity started? So I made a mental note of this. And later, when we got home in the evening, I found a moment to ask him, "Why were you so quiet this morning?" And he looked at me like I was mad. He said, "Mommy, we're in Nando's and we were there to make burgers. What a silly question to ask." So his comment made me smile, but it also gave me food for thought. So now let's hit pause for a moment. Now, gradually pull back the curtain on your team. What do you see? Most likely a mix of people and personalities working together. Look a little closer. You'll notice their differing working styles. Now, just like we had this situation where, the group leader was asking questions, you might have noticed situations in your team where some people are quiet when there are certain kinds of activities that start playing out. So every team has its share of introverts and extroverts. And according to estimates, extroverts outnumber introverts by about 3:1. But how does this difference in numbers impact the introverts in your team? And what implications does it have for the team dynamics? A team, after all, is a living, breathing system. And for it to truly unlock its potential, it must accommodate the needs of each distinct group, especially with regards to behavior and approaches to social situations. But what if I were to tell you that it's our collective understanding of both these broad groups that is getting in the way of the team working together as a unit? This was exactly where I was before I discovered recent research on the introvert extrovert spectrum. So let's delve a bit into the neuroscience of introversion. Now, the psychologist Carl Jung coined the word introvert and extrovert to define personality types in existence. However, today, this is thought to be a spectrum of behavior. So what exactly is a spectrum? Let me ask you all a question. I think Chitra will help me set up a poll for this. Are you left-handed or right-handed? You can respond on the poll.
Meena, we can do this on the chat box itself.
Okay, all right. So if you could type on chat, are you left-handed or right-handed? Please type your response in chat. I need some help to read them out.
Yes, we have got many people saying right-handed and then quite few people say left.
Okay, great.
And
so you're very sure you're left-handed or right-handed. Is that right? Okay. So with regards to human behavior, some things can very easily be categorized. Like, for instance, you can say with certainty that you're left-handed or right-handed. Similarly, if I were to ask you, what is your eye color? you would be able to tell me fairly confidently if it's black, brown, blue, green, or any other color. Now, these are all examples of discontinuous traits. However, with regards to introversion and extroversion, it's hard to say if a person fits neatly into either one of the two categories. In reality, most of us exhibit qualities of both and fall somewhere between the two. So rather than exist as a clear cut label, introversion and extroversion is regarded as a spectrum with individuals exhibiting a range of behaviors associated with both. They're no longer binaries. But where you sit on the spectrum is based on your sensitivity to the neurotransmitter dopamine. So, what exactly is a neurotransmitter and why is this important? Neurotransmitters serve as chemical messengers. Your body makes them, and the nervous system uses it to send messages between neurons and thereby different parts of the body. So, the brain needs neurotransmitters to regulate many necessary functions like heart rate, breathing, moods, and motor function. When the neurotransmitter dopamine is released in large amounts, it creates feelings of reward and pleasure. And this motivates you to repeat a specific behavior again and again. You would have seen this. This is typically something that happens when, for instance, you use Facebook and you scroll. So the Facebook scroll releases dopamine in your mind, which is why people tend to get addicted to the scroll, and they spend large amounts of time on social media. Now, studies have revealed that extroverts have more dopamine receptors in their brains than introverts do. This finding means that extroverts need more dopamine to feel happy because they're less sensitive to it. The more social they are, the more they talk and move around in groups, the more they feel dopamine's pleasant effects. In contrast, introverts are sensitive to dopamine. So all of that stimulation makes them feel overwhelmed and anxious. So going back to the spectrum, you can be a shy extrovert or a confident introvert, and all behavior makes sense. All behavior is normal. Different people can deliver different outcomes based on different strengths they have. This is not all. Introverts prefer to use a different neurotransmitter altogether. That's called acetylcholine. So Christian Fuenska has written an excellent book, Quiet Kids. And in the book, Quiet Kids Help Your Introverted Child Succeed in an Extroverted World, she says, and I paraphrase, like dopamine, acetylcholine is also linked to pleasure, but acts differently. Acetylcholine makes us feel good when we turn inward and thus powers our ability to think deeply, reflect, and focus intensely on just one thing for a long period of time. This helps explain why introverts like calm environments. It's easier to turn inward when you're not attending to external stimulation. When we read, concentrate, or use our minds in a certain way, we feel good because our brains release acetylcholine. The effects, however, are more subtle and gentle than dopamine, and so extroverts hardly register it. So, what implications does this lack of understanding have for the introverts in your teams? First, there are many commonly accepted myths around introversion. Daniel Kahneman, the author of Think Fast and Think Slow, said a reliable way to make people believe in falsehoods is frequent repetition because familiarity is not easily distinguished from the truth. This is especially true about these frequently accepted myths around introversion because they become negative stereotypes that introverts then have to contend with. One of these commonly accepted myths is that introverts are antisocial. Studies have found that both introverts and extroverts like interacting with people. However, it's the response to stimulation that makes them different. Given that introverts are more sensitive to dopamine, they find it more enjoyable interacting with smaller groups and forming deeper and more meaningful connection. They might find it hard to make small talk. Another commonly accepted myth is that introverts are shy. Shyness often stems from anxiety in social situations, and that's totally different. You can be a shy extrovert. You can be a very confident introvert as well. These myths turn into negative stereotypes that introverts then need to contend with in the workplace and in life and everywhere else. Remember that, these are just myths. They are not meant to box people in. So introverts are socially different, and that's what we need to keep in mind. Now, I'd like to ask you all a question. Based on your experiences, based on what you've observed in your teams and in the groups that you're part of, how do you think introverts and extroverts behave in group? I invite you to share and chat. Yeah, I see some responses coming through.
Yeah. Extroverts speak first, then think, and introverts need more time to process usually. And Shubha has
Mhm.
said extroverts present and introverts contribute with thoughts and ideas. And we have got another response from Mino. And introverts often wait for everyone else to respond before they speak. And Jigasha has mentioned, so extroverts will participate in each activity and introverts speak last. Yeah.
Great, great. Thanks for all that. Very insightful. Thank you for sharing. I'm just going to quickly share. Okay, just give me a minute. This is not moving. Yeah. So, how do introverts and extroverts behave in groups? A lot of it has been shared. Thank you for those insightful responses. So, the thing is, extroverts tend to think out loud. Introverts, on the other hand, will tend to think and process thoughts before speaking. Somebody had said that. So, it might appear that the introvert is quiet, but they're actually thinking things through before they start sharing. You will also notice that they are more precise with language while describing things. And this can be a source of conflict in groups because it'll appear like an extrovert is contributing more and talking more. But in reality, introverts are just working in a slightly different way to the extroverts are. Extroverts are also energized by being around people in large groups, while introverts tend to prefer working in small groups. They will lose energy if they are with large groups of people for long periods of time. Finally, extroverts feel energized through the social interaction, so that's very important. However, introverts need time alone to recharge. So, this is a very, very important distinction and is something that we should keep in mind because, especially in a virtual world, I attend a lot of conferences. What I've seen is that when you have a break, sometimes you have breakout rooms and the invitation is to socialize. Now, that might be a break for an extrovert, but for an introvert, it is not a break. So it's very vital to remember this distinction. So it might seem like the introverts are withdrawing, but in reality, they're just stepping back so that they can get their energy levels back to a point where they can come back and rejoin the group. And if you are a facilitator, it's really important that introverts get these breaks, that is, step away and come back. It's important for everybody, but it's very, very important for introverts. So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Now, society celebrates extroverts, and this in turn places a burden on introverts to act and behave in a more extroverted way. And we have a very, very big word for this, a giant word, in fact, called should. And this says loud and clear that there is an ideal or desired result. So the world is by default built for extroverts, and introverts are just expected to fit in. This starts very young. You'll notice that if children are shy, they are coaxed to talk more, and they're asked to come out of their shell. Sometimes parents can even force them to talk uh, to relatives who are in the child's eye a stranger. So this starts this sort of social conditioning, and the word should starts operating very early in life, and it can be very uncomfortable for the introverts because they have a very rich inner world that they're already attending to. And then this continues into adulthood. People who appear confident are more likely to get praise and promotion, and their contributions in general are viewed more favorably. And if you go online, there's a plethora of training available to enable people to negotiate better, to power pose, to appear more confident. None of this is wrong by itself, but it just says that, there is a certain way that we expect people to be, and that way is better than this way. And so try and do this training to try and get there. And that's what is kind of frustrating. So introverts will find themselves in an environment that keeps giving messages to change themselves. But we have to keep in mind that there is really no right or wrong when it comes to personality types. And what is sad is the collective loss of human potential. So, by forcing these deep thinkers, great listeners, and insightful people out of their shell, we're also asking them to put aside their natural superpowers and become someone else. We're asking them to become ordinary. And this is where society does injustice to those amazing introverts around us. Clearly, that morning, I was guilty of the same. I expected my son to join the chorus of chirpy voices, but he in turn helped me learn that participation comes in many forms. So you cannot change the introvert brain, but in the next slide, you can see some amazing introverts who have actually changed the world. I'll let that sink in for a minute. Okay. So, time to put some of the things we've just learned into action. Before we talk about teams, a good place to start is you. Remember what I said in the beginning about introversion and extroversion not being binaries, but a spectrum. Personality traits exist along a continuum, and the vast majority of us aren't introverts or extroverts. We fall somewhere in the middle. So, Dr. Adam Grant, an organizational psychologist at Wharton, has researched this continuum, and he found that two-thirds of people don't strongly identify as either introverts or extroverts. These people are called ambiverts. They have both introverted and extroverted tendencies, and the direction they lean in greatly varies depending on the situation. So, he has designed a 10-question quiz to help assess where you sit in the spectrum. So we're all going to do a little exercise together. I'm going to give you all 3 minutes so that you can complete this quiz. When you finish, please post your results on chat. So Chitra will post the link to the quiz.
Yeah,
You can finish the quiz and then post it on chat. Thank you, Chitra.
We have got two responses. Rebecca and Aarti has got ambivert.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. How's everybody else getting along? Let's give everybody a minute or so. A minute or two.
Chetan says ambivert.
Okay.
And we have got one introvert.
Very nice.
Meera
I have
says
company.
introvert. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we've got a few more responses now.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. Chitra, over to you.
Ambivert.
Okay, great. All right. So thank you so much for sharing. There are many such personality quizzes and assessments. The most famous is the MBTI, or the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which gives you 4 initials for various facets of your personality. One of the 4 is for introversion or extroversion. I picked this one mainly because it was just 10 questions and it was free. And this is just for us to think about things. You know, it is not to put people into boxes. It's more a tool. It is to create the self-awareness. It's to get people to introspect a bit. And that was the main reason why I picked this quiz. So moving on, I'd like to say, I would like to invite people to pay attention to how your energy ebbs and flows in different social situations. Let's take 2 minutes and reflect on what energizes you and what drains you. I invite you to share on chat. What energizes you and what drains you?
Rebecca says, I'm energized by being alone, reading, or being in nature, specifically by water.
Thank you.
And there's another response, new work challenge energizes, and good feedback and appreciation.
Great. Brilliant. Anybody else?
I'm drained by too much of noise, violence, and bad energy.
Great. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. So this is really important, especially if you're an ambivert. It's important for everybody, but because ambiverts behave differently in different situations, how energy ebbs and flows is a very important tool for your own self-awareness. And what's important is to plan in restorative niches. A restorative niche is nothing but a place or an activity or a change in environment that recharges you. Schedule this into your day. It is especially important to schedule these after activities or after being in environments which basically suck the energy out of you. I'll give you an example. I am the mom of 2 boys, and I'm fairly accustomed to being in noisy environments, right? My kids are active and they run around. And I always notice, though, even though I have a lot of fun with them, if I'm with them in this hyper stimulated environment for long lengths of time, I get very tired. So I need to stop and I need to go out for a walk or do something else for myself. Typically, it's going out for a walk. Just to be away from the noise. And then when I come back, I feel refreshed and I'm able to engage in activity again. So that's my restorative niche. For some people, it could be yoga or meditation or anything else. So whatever it is that restores energy for you is your restorative niche. So try and plan that into your day, and it'll change how you respond to certain kinds of stimulation. Now, just moving on. Sorry, my slides are not moving. Just give me a minute. Yeah, so I love this quote by Dr. Adam Grant. He's the designer of the quiz. No matter your type, no matter whether you're an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert, flexibility is a quality we can all embrace. So think of your personality as serving like an anchor. So for instance, knowing that I'm an introvert, I do know that, there are certain kinds of situations I probably don't want to be in. So it just serves as an anchor, but it's not to constrain me. It's just to prevent me from sailing away or getting into deep waters. So instead of constraining you, it keeps you from drifting too far as you pursue your new possibilities. So I love this quote. And moving on. Now we're going to move our focus to the groups we are part of, the teams. It could be any circle of relationships that we frequently encounter. It could even be your family or a group of friends. So think of any group that you're part of. Here, understanding the introvert extrovert spectrum helps us build bridges and break down walls in communication. So, how do we do that? One second. Okay, my slides are stuck. Just give me a minute. Yeah, okay. So talk about the introvert extrovert spectrum. That's the first thing to do because awareness is a powerful thing. So if you're a facilitator in a team, help people understand the impact that they're having on each other and give them the tools to help themselves. So I speak about the introvert extrovert spectrum and introversion and extroversion to some of the teams I coach. And I always notice a shift in behavior, an acknowledgement that being anchored to a certain, this is the way we've always done kind of thing. And people begin to understand how this can impact contribution from others in the group. And I've also noticed that people start paying attention to otherwise invisible strengths. And it improves relationships of people different to each other. And it helps us be more inclusive as people. If you're an extrovert, first recognize that you have privilege. Privilege is like an invisible knapsack of provisions that you count on each day, but which are largely invisible and unacknowledged. Those who enjoy a privileged position may not even be aware that they do so. On the other hand, those lacking it will be painfully aware of it and notice it. So if we think of work, at least back in the time when we were not remote or hybrid, it's typically open plan offices, and then meetings that are often structured in a way that there are many things extroverts can take for granted. But this makes it very difficult for introverts to contribute, and they can feel misunderstood or for having a certain style of working. Introverts also frequently have to act more extroverted if they want to survive. And there is a certain cognitive load that results from people trying to just fit in. And this has enormous implications for people's productivity, happiness, and overall well being. So it's not a very good place to be in. And we all owe it to our teams to try and build bridges by talking about the introvert extrovert spectrum. The other thing is to create time to reflect before, during, and after meetings. We spend a lot of time in groups in the workplace, especially virtually. This can take place. This takes the form of meetings. So, as a simple principle, and this is just a principle, build in reflection time for people to write down their ideas before speaking. This can really help introverts collect their thoughts. Now, I'm just sharing the principle. There are many ways, many practices that you can use in your facilitation. For instance, there are a lot of liberating structures. There are other things that you might be using. But the principle to keep in mind is giving people time to collect their thoughts before they share helps the introverts to collect their thoughts because they think first before they speak. And so keeping that in mind is important. Susan Cain, the author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, has come up with an inclusive meeting checklist. And this has some valuable suggestions. I found this checklist very, very useful. But I'm going to share my favorite tip from the checklist, and that's post agenda items as questions. Questions help people prepare. They make it easy to keep the discussion on track and make it easier to determine if the discussion is complete. And she also highlights the importance of pre-work for introverts. So if you want a good meeting and you want your introverts to participate, give the group a little bit of homework. Give them a little question that they can think about or something about the agenda that they can come prepared for. And this will help people contribute better, especially the introverts. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend this book. This gave me a lot of insights into myself as a person, and has also helped me understand how introversion and extroversion has an impact on team dynamics. So I would really recommend this book if you want to learn more on the topic. Finally, we all need breaks. Breaks improve our well-being and help prevent burnout. However, introverts really need breaks to recharge. And these breaks need to be free of the buzz of social activity, the quiet breaks where you can just be. A few slides back, I mentioned how breaks are sometimes used to promote networking. And this can be really, really difficult for introverts. So I remember reading this somewhere. Network is a noun before it became a verb. So if you're an introvert and you feel pressured to forego your break, remember to advocate for yourself and hold that boundary. I do it. I'm an introvert. I do it. I can come and talk to you about something I believe in, and I'm extroverted in that way. However, I fit many of the criteria that I just spoke about, that are signature traits of an introvert. Remember that you're just socially different and go at a pace that suits you. A large number of people are ambiverts, and research has found that ambiverts need breaks too to make up time for using one side of their personality more than the other side. So only you know what this is. So make sure that if you're not given a break, you ask for it. But if you're a facilitator or if you're facilitating a group, make sure you plan breaks. It's good facilitation anyway to have breaks, but you can see how this will impact certain people more than it affects others. So build those breaks in intentionally, and you'll have a much happier group all around. Now, as a facilitator, based on what you've listened to so far, what are you planning to take back to your daily practice? I invite you to share on chat.
So we have got one response, encouraging everyone to take break every 50 to 60 minutes.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Rebecca says, as I encounter new squads, I will take time to work out for the introverts, extroverts, and ambiverts so that I can facilitate for all.
Great. That's a good one.
More
Thank
pause
you.
and check-ins later in the meetings to allow for all to share input and distribute the agenda with question a day or two beforehand.
Great. Brilliant. Okay. I see one more coming through. Let's get that one too.
Okay. Asking introvert to present at last.
Okay. So inviting them to join the conversation. Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much. All great points. We're getting almost to the end of the presentation so that we then have some time for questions. Finally, we all fall somewhere on the introvert extrovert spectrum. But regardless of where you are, there is no best personality and there are no shoulds on how people should be to fit in. Instead, if we turn our focus towards understanding ourselves, we benefit from the self-awareness and also gain a greater understanding of the people we encounter in the various groups we're part of. So the dictionary has two definitions for a spectrum. One is used to classify something in terms of its position on a scale between two extreme points. In our case, that's introversion and extroversion. The other, and the one that I much prefer, is a band of colors as seen in a rainbow. And that's how I think of all of us as people. We sit somewhere on the spectrum, but it takes all the colors in the spectrum to actually make a rainbow. I hope today's talk has sparked some thought, and we can all work towards creating more inclusive spaces where everybody can be themselves. And finally, questions and answers. So over to you.
Okay, so Meena, there's one question from Sophie. Have you got any tips on coaching introverts one-to-one, which avoid driving the conversation in an attempt to make them comfortable?
Okay, so what is the challenge you're seeing, Sophie, with regards to coaching introverts? Like, is there a specific challenge that you're seeing there with regards to the introverts that you're thinking about? I think we need chat to share.
It's about not driving the conversation.
Okay, I think having the coaching conversation one-to-one, making time for the conversation, all of the practices that typically work to build connection, um, giving yourself enough time, asking good questions, pausing, allowing them to think and get back to you. All of these will work. And maybe picking an environment which is quiet, which is good practice anyways, would help. So different individuals will have different challenges. I haven't encountered one specific challenge for all introverts. It's very much based on personality, other personality traits as well. But this is what I would say to get them to open up. I hope that answered your question.